Hello, and welcome to Doctor Who 50 years ago, the show that looks back to the episode that aired in 1967 and looks at the differences between then and now. This week, episode 5 of the Faceless Ones, focusing on flights, fights, and faces. I am Ben.
I am Luke.
And I'm Nick.
And here we are, and here we go into the news from 1967. On Sunday the 30th of April, the House of Commons agreed to seek the admission of the UK into the European Economic Community. Essentially, the major thing here is that both parties in Britain's two-party system, the Conservatives and Labour, the second one being Labour, eventually have agreed at this point to membership of the EEC. How much has changed in 50 years. 50 years on, we're now bailing out, regardless of any consequences whatsoever.
Well, what it shows is that in the late 60s, early 70s, the British public and the UK had a very globalist outlook, and that has shifted into a very isolationist, not nationalist, but sort of, we as a country and the society is almost more turned in on itself and doesn't want to accept so many global influences.
It's against that form of internationalism that was penned as the future throughout the 70s.
I think that's going to be very important for the episode today.
On Wednesday the 3rd of May, the US Marines captured the heavily fortified peaks of Hill 881, south of the demilitarized zone between North and South Vietnam, after a 3-day battle. It's a rare American victory, but it's also important for other reasons.
Yes, because if you put into YouTube Hill 881, you will find quite a few newsreels and propaganda footages. So not only is this a rare American victory, but it's also one that they definitely tried to show everyone. They're not letting their small victories go unnoticed, even if they are only small and irregular.
Yeah, so heavily publicised, heavily propagandised. Use for Johnson's Democrats to maintain political favour in the US?
Well, I should imagine so. I mean, I'd say, oh, look, we won, at the top of my voice if I was scared for my job.
Yep. And finally, on Thursday the 4th of May, Lunar Orbiter 4, yes, we've gone up the list now, was launched by the US. It became the first probe to enter a polar orbit around the Moon and photographed 99% of the near side of the Moon, which is enough.
It's
really.
the Moon's good side.
It's the good side, the side that we see.
Yeah,
yes,
well,
the side that doesn't have Cybermen behind the back of it.
I think this is significant in that up till now the Soviet Union has had most of the firsts with regard to the space race and with the Moon. So it's significant the Americans have managed to get a one-up on the Russians at this point. It sort of is foreshadowing the fact that the Americans will overtake and pull way ahead of the Soviet Union in the space race in the next couple of years.
Where the Soviets had all these big early gains in the 50s and up to the early 60s, the Americans here are using slow technological chains to leap ahead before finally reaching the ultimate goal.
You could argue the space race nicely reflects the fact that at the beginning of the Cold War, the Soviet Union and the United States were both quite competitive with each other. And then as time wore on, the Soviet Union stagnated more and more. When Brezhnev took over, that whole era is considered an era of stagnation. So
yes,
you could say that the space race is a good proxy to reflect the changing fortunes of the Eastern and Western blocs.
It's also another form of internationalism that's different between 50 years ago and now. Strange Cold War and competitive, the more cooperative in the majority of cases.
Yeah.
In this day and age, there you are, and that's the point of the news, to highlight those differences between 50 years ago and now. That was the news, and now we shall go into the Faceless Ones episode 5. The story's starting to drag a bit.
Is it?
Yeah.
In my opinion.
I thought this was one of the fastest paced ones we've had. At least it felt quite actiony. I mean, as actiony as kind of like talking can get, but
Yeah, this is the turning point when the Doctor starts to figure out their plan and has his own plan. This feels like Act 3. I don't.
Maybe my interest's waning. I don't know.
Well, okay. Here's the thing. In your declaration of interests, you were saying how intrigued you were that this was going on near where you lived in Gatwick Airport. And this is when we're finally starting to leave Gatwick Airport. We have those scenes on the satellite and the Doctor goes up in the plane. It's like we're moving away from that Earth space drama.
We could be we could be falling back into regular Doctor Who, and that's less interesting in my point of view than the Gatwick scenes, perhaps. Although there are a few more Gatwick scenes to be dealt with, but perhaps it then does fall into the convention of Doctor finds traitor, makes him turncoat, and uses him to bring about collapse of alien invasion.
Yeah, this is more traditional.
Yeah.
No, I would say my biggest criticism of the episode is that the interrogation of the turncoat chameleon Meadows does turn into an info dump, pretty much.
The 10th Planet and the Underwater Menace both have relatable societies that undergo horrific surgery in order to extend their lives, that they don't really like but feel necessary. And as you were saying in the news, how they were starting to have a more global mindset, it's interesting to note here, against, say, the Zygons in 1975, who are evil species, and the Autons when they're brought back in New who are reduced to a giant hole in the floor of screaming gunk. That here, the alien invader, they've gone through such hardship in such a relatable way that it's almost difficult to call them evil.
Yeah, it brings on a trait of relatable villains, the morally grey, the ambiguity of it all, which is something that Malcolm Hulke really does give to the show time and time again.
It's not just relatability, it's that self-mutilation aspect. They might be destroying you, but they've already destroyed themselves.
Yeah, and so there's a sense of needing to learn from it, rather than repeating the cycle over and over again. So, the plane goes up to the space station. Anne and Blade leave the plane for said space station, followed by Jamie, who's not miniaturised. Some chameleons remove the missing passenger's luggage, and then Anne shoves a load of miniaturised passengers into a drawer of a very large storeroom, before capturing Jamie in said storeroom. Let's bring on the chameleons. They're quite creepy. These faceless and indeed voiceless ones, horribly burnt by some giant explosion, hence the info dump later on. Yeah, but they're also kind of reduced to servants.
Well, as you say, the chameleons are creepy. They're skulking around, and the music as well. It's not quite music. It's more just the radiophonic department doing something.
Ambient.
Yeah, but it really works, and it sells me that I feel that Jamie really is having to creep about, and the music sort of reflects his internal fears, I think.
Speaking of the threat, I kept looking for humour throughout this episode, but I was unable to find any. And I started wondering, would the chameleons have looked like air hostesses? Or the final line, you won't be needing living space. Anything that could be funny is reduced to... It's all played very straight.
Yes. Yeah, it's quite the tonal shift.
You can tell the action is hotting up because everyone's got a stony face and the Doctor's almost torturing people.
And as we learn, we do have a stake of 50,000 young people.
Yeah. So the decrease in humour reflects the fact that the Doctor no longer is. He's dropped the facade of being a kind of clownish hobo. He's now actually. He's fully in Doctor mode now.
It's almost as though the pace of technology is such that people would think, well, all of these massive reels of papers everywhere have been reduced to small amounts of computer tape. Can we do that to humans? Technology coming into humans has been a theme of this entire season, would it have looked like technology going a bit too far, that they're able to shrink down humans in that way? Or would it have seemed like a really useful, logical thing to do? Because technology is always getting smaller. And this seems like a natural extension of naivety as to what you can do with it.
I think it's trying to expand upon the concept of steady technological progress, but there always exists the precipice of you going too far. You suddenly activate Daleks, or become Cybermen, or explode horribly.
Yeah.
I think that's the theme that Jerry Davis and Kit Pedler wanted to bring in. Back at Gatwick, the Doctor continues to persuade the Commandant of the aliens' existence, and the Chameleon Meadows comes in. With knowledge from the last episode, the Doctor reveals that the chameleons have black armbands to contrast with the kidnapped humans' white armbands, which is how the conversion process is stabilised. Meadows is now their prisoner, and he reveals the satellite's existence and all the exposition and moral dilemma needed for the chameleons. Hello, Zygon prototypes, and that's why I constantly bring up the Zygon invasion inversion. We just want to live here peacefully. Why can't we do that? Because you're taking other people's identities? Hello?
So why do you think we're expanding upon that in New Who?
The Zygon invasion inversion, it was refugees, the current aspect of the day. With the Faceless ones, it's the deformities faced by nuclear war, and that people seemingly lose their identity through conflict blowing themselves up, and to that extent Hulk is using the idea of identity. Why on earth would you have the identity of a race that would blow each other up to smithereens? Let's take on a more peaceful aspect. But you can't copy it, you have to steal it.
So today we're trying to integrate, but back then it's saying...
assimilation through replacement?
Yeah. Yeah, I suppose we have much more of an acceptance of other culture now. Whereas I suppose if you look towards the Red Scare of us versus them,
yes,
other ideologies were feared and hated.
Pinto is revealed to be the senior in charge of the conversion processes, and the Doctor goes to deal with her. Pinto has Samantha. She's not on the plane, as erroneously said by me last episode. Sorry. The Doctor captures Pinto and frees the kidnapped Samantha, so that was pointless. In threatening Meadows, the chameleon Pinto dies as the human Pinto is revived. Meadows' turncoat status is complete, which is very crime drama. And then the Doctor discovers Jamie's disappeared.
The bulkiness of the technology is completely at odds to everything else that we've seen with the chameleons. Until this point, they've been very cunning and subtle. Whereas here, they're foiled because they have a big thing on their arms. It's as though it's spelling it out for the audience in a way which feels out of place for me.
Yeah, okay, that is probably a stark contrast to these cunning, intelligent, but somewhat naive and internally strifed aliens, perhaps. Yeah. Or it's just used for easy recognition, like you said.
The thing is that nowadays, it could go one of two ways. It could either be so murky you don't know who's a good guy or a bad guy, or it will be so spelled out for you in this sort of they wear black, they wear white sort of way.
It's difficult to find the middle road, because if you go down the first road you suggested, you end up confusing the plot and the storyline and the audience, and if you go down the other way, you get lambasted for being too simple. It's a very tricky road writers have to go down. On the spaceship, Jamie is visited by Inspector Crossland, who is now the chameleon director. He tries to get vital evidence out of Jamie before he crows about how intelligent he is. They're very cocky chameleons. Blade flies back to Earth to get the last of his chameleon workforce back before running away with 50,000 young people, their identities and their faces. This is their plan, folks. What do we think of it?
It's informed by sci-fi, but it's not playing out as one.
It's not so much an invasion, an alien invasion, which is what most sci-fi would like to do. This is sort of an interesting role reversal, and that they come to Earth, pick up what they want, and then run
mass
off again.
abduction of people, basically.
Mass abduction.
Yeah, the figure of 50,000 is needed to really drive home the threat, like just how heinous what they're doing. They're not just taking a few people; they're taking quite a lot of people.
Oh, sorry, go on.
And yeah, no, you go on.
But what's interesting is that it is only 50,000, by which I mean, if it was, say, 15 million, everyone in the entire world would notice. However, you can lose 50,000 people, and it would be very, very weird. But until this point, no one's actually noticed except Samantha.
Yeah, hence why the police shove her off with people go missing every day. Yeah, entire plane loads.
Yeah, exactly. In this sort of society, you can start missing people, and that can just be what happens. There is no explanation for it. And I think it's a bit telling how little people are noticing. It's very chilling in that way.
It depends on how much publicity they earn. He says, skirting around a certain missing case.
This episode has been very cruel to Jamie. What I noticed is that when they said at the beginning, the intelligence of Earth people is comparable to only that of animals on our planet, it then cuts to Jamie, as he's the one on there. And then Jamie is the one being interrogated here, and basically they've picked a very bad Earthman to abduct if they want a representation of humanity. In fact, Jamie gets treated a lot worse in The Two Doctors when Shockeye is tenderizing him and he says, "Oh, these Earth creatures, they don't have the same powers of feeling that we do." I think it's interesting that the idiot, naive Jamie, although I love you, is always the one that these villains pick on as a representation of humanity. It's almost funny in that way.
Well, I think it's often they have this bad idea of humanity that we're stupid savages or whatever, and Jamie sort of reinforces that negative stereotype to them, that they want to believe that we're like that, even though most people are not. I know he's not a stupid savage, but because he is simpler, more naive, they think that of him.
I'd also add that it's very telling which two writers we're discussing, both Robert Holmes and Malcolm Hulke here, which are Terence Dix's go-to authors for when we need to belittle the human race ever so slightly.
Very interesting.
There you go. The Doctor discovers the 25-strong workforce is about to leave on the last flight, and he wants to be on it to tackle the problem in space head-on. The Commandant, now fully convinced, agrees to a scheme that will get the Doctor on that plane by pretending to be a chameleon, whilst the Commandant is given the task to hold hostage the last chameleon on Earth, Meadows, poor thing. He uses the human Pinto to convince Blade that he, the Doctor, was now processed, is now a chameleon, and can get on the plane to the space station.
Blade says, "Jenkins will see you through immigration." I do quite like that even though we're in the midst of the villain's plan as they're about to fully take control, they're still having to deal with bureaucracy. It's still there, and that's a very much part of this story. The Doctor's main obstacle isn't that he needs to fight the aliens, it's that he needs to fight the bureaucracy before he can stop these aliens who probably aren't very good anyway, since they get found out pretty quickly as soon as the Doctor can find out about them.
It's that nice contrast of hurdles that you've got the normal everyday obstacle, and then you've got the giant massive alien obstacle, and both of them.
And an interesting thing as well on that throwaway line is Jenkins, if you remember, is now a chameleon as well, and it's a nice little touch that they still refer to each other by their human names. They're so
Ah.
They're so into
Subsumed
their
of their identities.
human identities because they have to be so hidden. They call each other.
Compared with, say, Monoid number 1 and number 2.
Yeah.
The Commandant, the lovely secretary, and Samantha work with the police to search for the 50,000 young people, whilst the Doctor arrives at the space station. The director has processed Jamie. He's now a chameleon with a very bad English accent, because he isn't intelligent. Blade reports the Doctor and the human nurse Pinto to the director, but the director dismisses him as somebody he can use for his advantage. Blade's bloodlust overcomes him, and he captures and prepares to shoot down the Doctor and nurse Pinto.
Ah, Doctor, you won't be needing living space. You will be needing dying space.
He might as well have gone one bit further, shoved into an airlock and go, "You want some space? Here's some space!"
Yeah. So this cliffhanger...
It's very Bond villainy, and this is why the chameleons, in spite of all their intelligent ideas and subgenre, they're incredibly cheesy and cocky and, for want of a better word, stupid.
I think you sort of need them to be stupid. It's to show that how could a race so clever destroy themselves? It's reflecting humanity, basically.
Clever subtext, yeah.
Yeah. What I'll say about this cliffhanger is it's very traditional compared to some of the other ones we've had in this serial, which are more like, "Oh, what's the mystery?" etc., etc. This is just a very traditional cliffhanger.
It's literally the chameleons are the humans, and the humans could become the chameleons. It's those two switches of identity.
Not they could physically become, like, pretend to be the chameleons, but the chameleons are what
the chameleons are a metaphor.
We could become the chameleons as a race. We could destroy each other ourselves, lose our identities.
Metaphorically, yeah. I've only just realised that identity role.
So it's not quite the moral. So it's not Hulk saying we're the moral equivalent of each other, but he is saying that is an example of what we could be if we decide to destroy ourselves.
I think it's telling in that context then that the Doctor goes on the front line for humanity in this. He, throughout this, has been that voice of the anti-bureaucrat, anarchy and freedom for all. Here in the Macro Terror, he was pushing that. And it's good that he's riding into space in order to do that for us.
It's yet another layer of contrast this episode has. It's complex yet simple. It's got intelligent yet stupid aliens. It's got these two moral dilemmas. It's riding two horses at the same time, going in different directions. Perhaps that's why I like it, because this isn't your traditional average run-of-the-mill Doctor Who story. It's got that, but then it's also got this extra layer of, oh, here's a New Earth story. Oh, here's this moral dilemma. Oh, they're intelligent but stupid. It's got everything weird, but also everything original. And rather than me slating all the originality in it, I should all the traditionality in it, I should be praising both it and its ability to mix and blend with the new original ideas that Malcolm Hulke is bringing.
Just saying, those are all of the reasons I like the Macro Terror.
Yes, I have recognised that.
Just as a thing then, what are the differences between this and the Macro Terror? If they're both trying to achieve the same thing, of the Doctor is this anti-bureaucracy force in a strange world, what separates this from the Macro Terror? Is it that it uses that more traditional story that is instantly more identifiable?
I don't think so. I think it's to do with the locations and the themes. The two different locations. I'm very down to earth, whereas you're in a alien area, but with bits of home, the authoritarian bits labelled in. The theme, I've got mass nuclear war and strange sounding alien names. You've got strange sounding alien names. And
more accessible mindset. That while the Macro Terror was deliberately insane, the Faceless ones uses that crime drama aspects of itself in order to relate to the viewer more. It's as though it's speaking personally to you, whereas the macro terror is being as insane as it possibly can, like a kid on a sugar high, screaming its head off.
There are lovely bits of sanity in the macro terror. The whole theme of rebelling against control is a sane option sometimes. And we have the crazy, intelligent but stupid comedians here in the Faceless ones. There is our slightly rambly take on the differences between Doctor Who 50 years ago and now. Thank you very much for watching. You can find us on Blogspot, which redirects to iTunes. Leave positive comments there, it helps. You can also find us on Facebook and YouTube, where you can like, comment and subscribe, and Google Plus if you dare. We shall be back next week to make a deal with the finale of the Faceless ones. Until then, I've been Ben.
4 has been Luke. 5 has been Luke! Damn it!
Stop doing it.
5 has been Luke. You won't get me to do it. Not to do it. You won't get me not to do it.
Stop doing it.
5 has been Luke.
5 has been Nick.
Stop. Ah! Right, fine. Thank you and goodbye.